Hi, boom, let me take my headphones off. Blue UK Jazz Dance. Welcome to Rebirth for the Cool, Volume 1. Dedicated 110% to my legacy. One of my legacies is I love Manchester and I love vintage. Yeah, engines, cars, and all that. Now, there's a correlation between Manchester. You remember the first ever steam engines, first engines. Vintage. Manchester is the classic city of it. And many people don't know that. You couldn't have the vintage period with all the technologies and all that without Manchester. That's why I love Manchester the city. I know the history and everything. And my love for vintage really started probably indirectly or directly within my home. My dad's suitcase, mum's suitcase, their wardrobes, they had things we'd never seen in Britain. So one of the key things was fashion. We realized that black people had different fashion to white people and Asian people straight away. And you go into the homes, our West Indian front rooms, they were like museums because the photographs that you see the dress in there, you see the different, and the parents got mail, envelopes, they keep things in a suitcase. And in the wardrobe, my dad had certain tie pins and ties that you never saw. And the way he looked after his clothes and the way my mum looked after himself, they had a lot of vintage self-care is how I came to love vintage in the beginning, people. So I said to a lot of people, I was born in 1964. You have to understand our parents came with amazing vintage ways. In the 1950s, my dad was 50 years. My dad was 14 years old. Mum was 8 years old. And that was like a massive transformation in the world of dance, music. Well, massive transformation. People could move around freely around the world for the first time. I'm saying doors were opening to America. And this was really progressive and this was brilliant for Caribbean people who wanted to go and work and make more money for their families, because they couldn't do because they were living in an impoverished way. Like my dad, 1955 to 61, he went to America. Then he came to Britain. We came by plane. My mum came to Britain in 61 by boat. Yeah, but one of the key things how I came to love vintage is basically through a horrible story, really. 6 to 8. I've probably seen things on television already, which I did. I've seen bubbles, I've seen musicals on television. So I love, you just got drawn into the musicals that were there. And you've seen slapstick comedy and all that sort of thing. But my love for Vinci started in a proactive way. Was 6 to 8. I was severely bullied at school. What happened? Basically, my parents had to send me to the Caribbean. You've heard the story. It was because I was violently racial, but I was tortured for 6 to 8. Part of my intervention, rehabilitation by my parents, was to send me, but only me, my brother and my sister, to the Caribbean to get a grounding in our culture. That's what the centre's there for. And we went to school there. That was important for me to see people in different positions because I was decimated as a person, socially, physically, intellectually, culturally, emotionally, spiritually. I had dark skin. I looked like a gollywog. I was acting like a gollywog. I had special education needs. I was shy. All the things that you talk about blacks being docile, I had that, and I was put in special ed needs case classes, and people were ashamed of that. You had to go to a block. People laughed at you, teased you. There's nothing I could do. I would be teased constantly all day from the day I got into school. Then you had sample books we had to read. That was embarrassing. So all round, I was decimated as a child. My parents could see it. That's how they found out. Cut a long story short, I sent to West Indies. On the way to on the plane, it was the first time my mum had been on a plane, and the first time we'd been on a plane. Was what happened was simply this was simply the woman took a good shining to me and said, "Would you like to?" Air hostess said to me, "Would you like to see the cockpit?" Boy, yeah. So I went into the cockpit and I saw the pilot and co-pilot and whatever. I said, "Oh, that's great. I like planes and all that." I said, "Well, what do you think of being a pilot?" That's what he said. So all of a sudden, that was what I had on my mind and everything. I mean, and I went to the Caribbean and I was there and I met someone who was in the RAF. He told me about black people being in the RAF. I said, "RAF? We ain't taught no history like that at school." He says, "Oh no, a lot of black people in Britain was in the RAF and Manchester, particularly there was a lot of African Americans here, with a whole host of people from the colonies." I thought you're taking the mickey. I didn't say that obviously, but I came back to Britain with that on my mind. You get me? So I started to study engines, people, and from 8 to like 26, really, I was trying to get into the RAF, people. You won't know it. And I used to have, I bought this to the day, beautiful thing. So you see it, model aircraft. And I used to have a lot of model airplanes, people. I used to make them. And I used to make electronic ones as one with my friends. Because the schools I went to, particularly my secondary school, a lot of people's fathers were engineers. So I had this. I used to study how to make planes, that sort of thing. But one of the places, I don't know, you know about Manchester. Manchester, here's Avro, Avco, okay? So basically, Elliot Verden-Rowe was one of the earliest pioneers of British aviation, making his first pioneer flight at Brooklands in 1908. In 1910, he formed the company which bore his name. Aero continued to remain to be at the forefront of aeronautical progress until it disappeared when it was absorbed into Hawker's Siddeley Aviation. Boom, 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 boom. But basically, Manchester had a amazing, some photographs, you can't really see them, but Manchester had an amazing contact with engines. Yeah. So remember, they were involved in every type of engine you could talk about came from Britain. They were making it. Do you know what I'm saying? And Manchester, amazingly, a lot of people came in from the world. So I got involved in learning to make engines. Yeah. Why? Because I wanted to go in the RAF. Now the RAF offered a whole list of jobs around airplanes. So the first thing, I wanted to be a pilot. So I studied people to be a pilot. And I liked all the films to do with aviation. Everything to do with aviation, I had it or studied it. And in my school, they had some books on aviation. And Manchester had a lot of stuff to do with aviation. So my parents, anything to do with aviation, they made sure I got there. So Manchester had a lot of air shows. I was there because I knew that was my dream. And I was serious-minded. As a child, I was very serious-minded. I had what is called old head. I had an old people's head. So I used to go to all the shows, everything that was on. I got there somehow. And I could travel myself as well because I started to do sports from 11 to 16. So one of the key things was vintage sports. I used to look at vintage sports also. Yeah, I'm saying. But one of these things, I could travel to events. My parents would allow me to go because I was traveling already because of sports. Yeah, that's what happened. 8 to 11, I was the best player at all sports in my school. So I was moving all the older guys. I had the old head. And then when I went to 11 to 16, I was running for Sale Harriers and Lancashire Cricket Ground School. Lancashire Cricket had a school in Stretford Sports Centre. So basically, I could do a lot of things myself. My autonomy, I should travel around a lot myself. So a lot of things I found out about aviation. I used to go there to have private lessons now for special education and needs, which is part of my rehabilitation. But I was involved in a lot of things. But I got to find out about a woman called Bessie Coleman, about black flyers and what they did. They were very independent. They went to France to learn to fly. Some of them flew in the First World War. People, a lot of blacks, yes, that's right, in France. They wouldn't get opportunities in America. A lot of people came back from France. Bessie Coleman came back from France, and she was flying aeroplanes in showcase events. Yeah, and how she died was a really, really horrible thing to do racism. What happened? The blacks would get substandard planes. That's right. And she got a substandard plane. That's what they say. It was a horrible story when I read about it. And I found about the Tuskegee Flyers and all that. I knew all about these things already. Yeah, I'm saying. Because we used to go to black study schools. And they used to give us all the information about America. We had a lot of extensive information about what Americans did. Freedom fighters, educationalists. You know, people who owned schools. Harriet Tubman. About racism there, about the Civil War. Everything was taught to us in our summer schools. Between 11 and 16, I lived in Saturday summer schools and summer schools. That's what my parents sent me because they knew it was important for me to not have cultural crisis, which I was struggling from because of the dark skin, because of how I was treated the early days of primary school. Never left me. I have flashbacks from it. I got proper tortured, you have to understand. So I used to go into this dream world of being an aviator. Imagine I wanted to be a pilot. That's how I came to love the clothes people and all the films. Then from then what happened was 10 years old, jazz funk comes in and we just changed. We just changed overnight because we knew jazz funk was the first music to play African, Brazilian, Caribbean music together. So we started to study that. In the black community, that's what people did. Remember, dads have been in America. Dads are musicians. Dads are pilot. Dads had flown planes. You need to understand. We had a wide range of people in our community. You got academics, people with PhDs and masters. So you need to understand. People assume when they think about black people that we're all this nigger wacoon thing. It's not. You know. They came with vintage, and we're connected to America. We're connected to Africa. Remember, my dad was around in 1950 when Ghana was free. 1962. So all like the movements had come from Jamaica, particularly because Marcus Garvey was part of the Harlem Renaissance. He was part of the movements that was called the Pan-African Congress movement. He was part of the Harlem Renaissance in America. So Jamaicans were connected with this whole thing. And the people you call some people in the United States are from America. I mean, people in the United States are from the Caribbean. You have to understand, from the southern states, seasoned slaves were taken to America. You're not connected. And they come from the different islands. And people still traveled. People already connect this when I try to tell them. They have this, I don't know, you have this semblance that black people didn't travel. We're the most traveled people in the world. Don't you understand? Right, beautiful. So basically, I'm giving you an idea. Manchester, I know the history of Manchester. Manchester's a place of first. It's an amazing city of first. To do with music, to do with science, to do with technology, to do with leisure, to do Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution transformed the whole of the world. So Manchester was global from the beginning. It had 1,100 merchants. When the Industrial Revolution was making cotton and all that, merchants had to come to live here to do deals. So I know my city is a very, very multicultural city, and I know the history of it. That's why I love it, because technological advancements came from here. If you want to know about slavery, you have to be here in the north. Liverpool, what it did, Sheffield, Nottingham, everything around the northwest of England has a strong semblance, real strong connection to do with vintage. Yeah, I'm saying vintage values, vintage ideas. But we do as well, because you had black Victorians very established in what they did. There was people that came here, Africans that came here as merchants and left the country. There was business being done. Manchester is a key place. The whole northwest of England is a place I love, but Manchester particularly is my home city because it nurtured my mind. So I try to tell people, you can't be in a place and don't love it. I have civic pride, and one of the things about UK jazz dancing was we had pride in our city because it was city versus city, and that became territorial. It was okay because it gave us some pride. Where do we have pride? That was a beautiful thing that we had. The dancers, I mean, sound systems the same. Sound systems were representative of the city, yeah, and that gave them pride to the city, and they carried that pride. Yeah, I mean, so basically, I was giving you insight into how I came to love vintage musicals. Like I said, my dad, first of all, my parents' clothes, my dad's suitcase, his clothes, how he was, his personality, his idiosyncrasies are very vintage. So are my aunties, uncles, and relatives. Going to a wedding, I didn't say that. I saw my parents get married at 3 years old. That was an important ritual to see. You know what I'm saying? And I know quite a wide range of rituals. But most importantly, you know, if you go into African Caribbean houses, they come from different places. And in their West Indian front rooms, it's like a museum. You go there and look at the photographs, you'll be amazed how different places look differently. That's right. That's how I came to love vintage. And then I started to love the films. But you could not love the films because you grow up with these films at your side. The aviation films, the slapstick films, the musicals. I don't know any black person that wasn't drawn to musicals, because your whole family spent days round the TV because of the musicals. So of course we love Freddie Astaire, Ginger Rogers, Bump. But one thing that stood out, when you saw the black musicals, we changed. Because we saw the dancing was different. Stormy Weather, wow. Cabin in the Sky, they stood out for me as films. In the way that they dressed, the way they went about their lives. And then what happened was, the thing how we came to love vintage was, they used to have Jazz Week on. I didn't move anywhere. You got to be ready, sleep in the day. Because what's going to happen, what they used to do is to put Black Week on, the films, the jazz films on late. Every black person knows this. I sometimes wake up 3 o'clock, go downstairs, put a TV on, a jazz film would be on, or some form of film to do with black people in them. They used to put them at night, and you used to be ready to that. But how we got ready, we came very systematic because we had the TV times and radio times. We didn't joke. And this is really, I want to let people know that what I'm doing now is what things we learned from our parents. The certain programs will be on about black people. You have to watch them. And your parents taught you that. So we learned to use TV times, radio times. The jazz pioneers were not jokers in Manchester. I can't talk about anybody else. I only can talk about, and then I can talk about my life and style. I was very meticulous. I was very much into research, and that's what I'm showing here today. Yeah, that I still was involved in research. I have a lot of books. That's with the Blue Lab. The Blue Lab, I do a lot of reading around jazz. The Blue Lab, I have a lot of albums. So identified to individual, there's a very important album. I was just about to share it with individuals, and if I can find it in my hand, because it's the most important album. Yep, I've got it. Okay, so the Blue Lab, has a number of different things. Boom. This is a book on Malcolm X, a small book. 1925 to 1965 is important. I was born in 64, yeah? And Malcolm X died in 1965, or assassinated, should I say. Now, there's books here. Book, yeah? Women in Jazz. This book came out in 1985. Many people don't talk about it. Snowboy's book is a Eurocentric book, by the way. Snowboy's book, Mark Cosgrove book, he wrote the definitive book, has no women in it. I can't really say nothing. Right, boom. And then I kept games, anything to do with vintage games. Yeah, this is called Darkwari. Yeah, and it's a vintage game that I bought. I buy them. Yeah, it's important. Now, most important book I talk about. This is where I do a lot of reading. You have to read this book, Stay in Power. Yep. You can't talk about UK jazz dancing without looking at this book. That's it, full stop. I don't care who you are, what you are, where you come from. You know nothing till you read this book. I'm telling you. It talks about black people in Britain, and you need to know that black people was in Britain a long time before boom boom, and how the music got here. Because we've given the DJs didn't bring the music, the seamen brought the music. You have to understand, black music wasn't seen as popular at first. You know what I'm saying? I tell you, because my teacher Thomas Olajide Ojueso, born in 1888, was in Britain. He told me he was a seaman, brought the music. Caribbean seaman brought the music. Now, this is the book I'm talking about. No point me talking about jazz. You talking about jazz if you don't have the definitive book, From Jazz, Funk and Fusion to Acid Jazz, the history of the jazz dance scene. Now, it wasn't a scene to me. Now, what I'm going to say here today, basically, there's different ways to look at it. There's a black perspective of looking at UK jazz dance within the heart of the black community, which 99% of the DJs didn't live because they were Anglo-Saxon. And there's a white perspective. Now, Snowboy's book to me is a white perspective. That's how I see it. It's his own account, and that's okay. He's done his own account. Now, what's important, you have to know about history, because remember, the music came from different places. This is a book on the chronological of the world history. It's a really good book that talks about history, how people travelled and all that. You have to know that because, remember, the Moors were here. Black people came from Ethiopia to Britain long time before they were slaves. So you need to know that history. Most importantly, what I was trying to get to was this. This is my teacher's teacher's album. What happened is a lot of miseducation about jazz, and this is one. Kenny Graham's Afro-Cubist, my teacher was on this. Yeah. Now, what happened? This was done between 50 and 53. It's important that you know that, because what happened in America, they tried to identify 5 key albums really got people listening. But it wasn't only that. This album, Mango Walk, was one of the albums that was recognized. But what happened really? American musicians got more recognition than British musicians. Okay, blacks being here, and secondly, there was a north-south divide from then. Also, my teacher told me about it. My teacher was on the first ever modern jazz album playing Afro-Cuban music, and he's not written in history, right? And how I'll talk about that history here. In this book, this is written by one of the established critics on jazz, John Fordham. Kenny Graham's not in it. He doesn't talk about the Africans that were here in the 1950s, because I think there's a little bit of conspiracy. Think about it. How many individuals seen pictures of blacks in 1950, 1960? If you saw them, you would never believe. They were very, very chic, very, very educated people that came here in the 1950s. They were the people fighting for the end of colonization, not very much established. Now, one of the key things I want people to have an understanding of, is this: caring for young people with special education needs. I was abused, special education needs person, mentally and emotionally. I was abused, and physically through strapping. That's important, you know. I was strapped for no good reasons. Yeah, I'm saying for things that happened to me, I was strapped because I was bullied and tried to defend myself. I was the one who got bullied. I got strapped for it. I know a lot about double standards in this country. That's why I stand up today, talking about UK jazz with a glowing references. Why? Because that gave me the escapism. That built me to be somebody who was an alternative subculture that many DJs put down, they wanted to control. And it's quite funny what I said to myself today. I said if I was in a lecture, I was describing, how would I describe a club and white DJs in there? Some. This is what happened. The DJ was seen as a massa. And it was like being in the southern states. That, you know, when they put people, the blacks, could go upstairs, separate from the blacks, whites. That's what happened. Or we were on a plantation and the massa wanted us to behave in the way that he wanted us to behave in accordance to his cultural mindset. Think about it. The DJs wanted us to act in the way that they wanted us. They wanted us to dance in our way, in our circle. Our circle messing up the club. We paid to get in the club. We were the buzz of the club. We were the entertainment in the club. Next minute, you're trying to dictate to us how we should be. I'm not even going to get into it. Anyway, I want to keep people a semblance. How I got into vintage, basically, was reading things on racism. The racism is known in the vintage period, is it not? At a huge high scale. All over the world. That's right. Then, a book. This person, Frank Kosky, is one of my key individuals that really started to open my eyes about the music. Black nationalism and the revolution in music. His book written by Kosky in accordance to another book called Black Music, White Business. He's the one started to make me think about economics. When I went back to university, why I did business management was I knew that, guess what? This is an industry. And I've identified a few people. People tried to stop me coming from the industry when I came back from Oxford Brookes University. I'd done my work. I took my time to learn my craft. Yeah, to project what I wanted to do. I came to collaborate with people. That's all I came to do. Individuals started to see me as a threat, especially when I put my Facebook, because I showed that I had not been lapsy-daisy. Many people were resting on the laurels, hadn't done nothing progressive. I was working. I'd done work in progress. I didn't sit down, and that's how the Bubbles piece couldn't just happen just out of the blue. It took time to write John Bubbles. I started it from 2005 at university, and I got it finally produced in London in 2015. I had to go through different processes with it. I took it to open stage in various places, Contact Theatre, Battersea Arts Centre, before I decided how I wanted to do it and where I wanted to take it to get it to be an hour and a half show. Do you know what I'm saying? So some people saw I was coming with a progressive stage in the revival. I wasn't just staying, guess what, I'm just going to revive the music. No. I come now knowing I was dancing to deep soul house jazz in Oxford Brookes, and that I had to find a deep soul house DJ who was into the music I was into, and I did find him. That was Earth and Rainy, who was an artist. That's how me and Earthman have been together. Me and Earthman have been together from 2010 to 2015, working together. Me helping him do some artwork and albums. Both of us trying to promote a positive experience in the clubs. Both of us into vintage. Yeah, I'm saying studying it, not just pretending that we're into it. We live the lifestyle. Him, Simon Tompkinson, me, his girlfriend Dawn Prescott and her friends. They all come from that bohemian flavor which I project in what I'm doing. In a bluuk jazz dance, I'm just giving you insight into vintage. Where it all started was in my home, and it starts in the home for 99.9% of African Caribbeans and Africans, because the parents come from their countries with the vintage outlook, which is a value, which is a way of life, and it's a culture. Each Caribbean island comes with their own culture, heritage, values. That's why I talk to individuals. When you talk about the dancers who pioneered. You have to look into their culture heritage. You have to look into their culture heritage. My dad's Jamaican. My mum's Grenadian. My dad's born in 1936, mum 42. They come from different periods within the vintage realm. My dad's parent, my both granddads on both sides, my mum's side were born in the late 1800s. That's the same time as my teacher, Thomas Alhaji Ojueso. He was like my grandfather. He's seen a lot. Yeah, I'm saying the mothers were both grown just in the 1900s when jazz was just birthed. But they didn't get that knowledge yet. But they all had the blues. You need to understand the blues was part of how people survived. Yeah, and I call us the children of Soul Deep. That's what I call us. Yeah, I'm saying Blue UK Jazz out, talking about vintage.